So today what we're going to be doing is getting into the next step. We talked a lot about the cardiac cycle, what's going on, ECG. We've played with frogs. Now we want to get into how this affects pulse pressure and how it affects the ability of our body to respond to different types of changes. So a lot of this is based off that baroreceptor reflex. So you guys are really familiar with that now. So that's good. What we're going to be doing today is basically playing with that baroreceptor reflex in certain kinds of contexts. And we'll be looking at, and we'll be adding, one of the elements we'll be adding is looking at how the control of the sympathetic nervous system affects something called total peripheral resistance. What that means is it not only is our sympathetic nervous system not only affects heart rate and stroke volume, but it also affects TPR, or total peripheral resistance, where we have constriction at our arterioles that feed from our arteries and as it travels down, and the arterioles help to control the access to the capillary beds. So that's and so we'll be talking a little bit about that and how those work. So let's kind of get into some of this work here. What I have is some sheets that you can use to help guide our thoughts today. So I'm going to use this as a launching point. Okay, so we have our assignment, which is here. So this assignment is going to feel much easier than the other ones. So that will be nice. The graphs that you're asked to make are simple bar graphs. There's a spreadsheet that you guys are going to be filling in. It's a Google spreadsheet. I just emailed you guys a link for it. So you'll be able to use that data and have access to that off of what you actually have collectively done today. So each of your different groups, you'll actually enter in the data once you've got most of the recordings done to help with seeing and analyzing it. So there are multiple different tables and different like a table here, a graph that's asked here, and some of those things you'll be able to draw directly from those sheets or be able to create an easy bar graph to help illustrate it. So this will feel much better than some of the other ones in terms of the work to do. It's still work, but it's not quite as bad. So a little bit more of a straightforward assignment. Okay, so let's so we have that. What I also have on here is this pre-lab. Oops. Well, this is useful, but it's not the one I was looking for. This one. It's called Scan from Our Notes, and then it kind of goes into a little bit more here. So this is what we'll actually be kind of walking through today in some of the different exercises and using. So there's a copy of it on Blackboard, so you don't have to scribble down all the things that I'm going through, but it'll help us be able to understand what it is that we're actually measuring. So out of our objectives that we have on page 129, we're looking at wanting to look at the immediate effects of blood pressure changes on cardiac output and TPR, or total peripheral resistance. Describe how baroreceptors adjust their firing rate in accordance with blood pressure. You guys are experts at that already. Describe the relationship between mean arterial pressure, cardiac output, and TPR, or total peripheral resistance. And there's an equation for that. And then how to measure somebody's blood pressure, and then mean arterial blood, and then calculating pressure values, pulse pressure, and mean arterial pressure. So some of the key things that you're going to want to be able to do out of it. So let's dig in here and get started. First thing that they're going to ask us to do is to measure heart rate and blood pressure out of one of your neighbors. And this, I think, there's some of these exercises that we have today that we're actually not going to do. They're pretty straightforward and seem a little silly. Sorry. And you kind of get the idea pretty easily. But then others, I think, are really, really good, and we want to dig into it a little bit. So one of the things that you'll be doing is that you'll be wanting to measure blood pressure. And so you may have somebody on your team who's actually measured blood pressure before. Okay, good. So there's an expert at every table. You know more than I do in terms of actually setting this up, and you actually had to do this before. But what you're going to be doing is, and the principle behind it, is that you're going to be applying the blood pressure cuff, and the artery goes here. You want it above the physical artery. You'll apply it, you'll wrap it around according to your expert. You have it at your table, will help you. And then that want to help? Yeah, that would be great. All right. Thank you. All right. Awesome. I know how to do the mice. Preclinical guy, sorry. All right. So, very, very tiny. Okay, so put this on, thank you. And then you tighten up this knob here. And then you increase your blood pressure. All right. You may have to play with it a little bit. So work with your local expert on this in terms of setting it up. But here's what you guys are going to be doing as you take the blood pressure cuff. You'll increase the blood pressure sufficiently that it actually cuts off the circulation to the rest of your arm. And what's being depicted here is your arm, here's your heart, see? And then it's pushing, trying to push blood past there. And when you first do it, you'll create a lot of pressure that will actually block off the blood flow. So it exceeds your systolic pressure. So this part, what we're saying here is like your systolic pressure right there is going to be exceeded by the blood pressure cuff. And so you're not going to get any blood flow. And I think with a different one I was used to a little better, you can, you keep it up there, and then your blood, you can tell your arm starts to turn a little blue. You're not getting any perfusion in there. But you normally don't do that with patients. What you do, though, is that if you put the stethoscope right below it, you won't hear anything moving through there. And that's because there's no movement of blood flow because you've cut it off. So here's something that I think makes sense, but you have to kind of think about it a little bit. When your blood pressure gets below what your systolic pressure is, then what happens is your heart is able to push the blood past the blood pressure cuff. So you're measuring how much pressure you're adding on top of your vein, and then as you lift it up, once you can hear through the stethoscope, you can hear the blood flow moving through. Well, then you've got your heart is now able to shove blood past there, and so whatever number that is, like 120 or whatever, is where you're going to actually start to hear the noise, and you'll hear what they call the sounds of corticoff, which is this turbulent blood flow. It's sort of squeaking through this constricted brachial artery here. And that turbulent blood flow makes a noise, and you can hear it, and that's what you're listening to. When the sound goes away, then what you have is that indicates that you've actually reached your diastolic pressure. And that's in some folks it's 80 millimeters of mercury. So I used to have really good blood pressure, and then the last physical I had, it was like 140 over 80, and I was like, hey, wait a minute. It's like, usually mine was like 110 or something. So I think I got to chill out. They checked it again, it was a little bit better, but still I'm like, it's not good. Anyway, so that's a little TMI, sorry. But what we've got here basically is that your diastolic pressure is here. And what's happening is that as you're when you're in the diastolic phase, That's like your lowest amount of pressure that you're going to be having. Your heart's relaxed, and that's the amount of pressure that you have in your systemic circulation. So it's going to keep open that blood vein when it's going through there, or the artery as it's going through there, that brachial artery. And it's not going to be squeezed by the blood pressure cuff because the blood pressure cuff isn't applying over 80 millimeters of mercury of pressure. So it's able to kind of keep it open and inflated as it's going through there. And so that's depicted when you drop your blood pressure below 80 millimeters of mercury, and then it's able to flow through. So that's why you lose the sound. You don't hear it as much. So, that's the basic idea of what you're listening for. There are these two different types of sounds as you do it. So you have an expert at your table. That's great. Have them show you how to do it. Try it out. Try doing it, and see if you can detect your blood flow out of here. And try to get that blood pressure. We'll switch to automated blood pressure machines afterwards for the rest of the exercises. But this one I think is a nice one to help illustrate the classic approach. So go ahead and do that. Right.
I mean, I was trained on manual, but I can't do it so.
Okay. Yeah, I was
All very long sleeves. So
it's
did
I?
Yeah.
They never made me.
Yeah, I feel like that. I think it's fine. Okay. So,
Oh, but they never make me.
I just got my blood done not too long ago, and I have like a thing, and I'm like, do I have to like pop stuff? And she's like, no, it's fine. So I think it should be good.
Okay.
So we have to do it.
I can't hear anything. Okay.
Like, should I? Might be able to. We might be able to. Where I
Oh, do you? Oh. All right. Yeah. We're right there. Oh, cool. Awesome.
Fill the cup with air until the pressure in the cup is 50 to 170.
Oh my God.
Blood pressure.
Oh, that's so
Oh yeah,
cool.
she
Yeah.
said that's so fun. Would be fun. Shall I listening to us?
Put it over one more.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it feels like coming. Take a bit.
I think it did too. All right. So I got an idea. Instead of using that, use these.
Can you hear anything?
Because I want to see if I can get this to work. I have to do better. I can't just rely on mice. So, yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. And
I had these
you've done this
on my
before?
card.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll try.
141.
All right, we'll try it out.
Not 280. Like,
I thought like this would like hurt, you know what I mean? Sorry.
All right, so place it here. Oh my God. All right, you want to try typing it up?
Right? Their arm falls off.
Yeah.
turn clockwise to go and then
Oh, so what? 150 to 170.
Yeah.
So, this is first right
I
now.
didn't hear anything, but we went really fast. Yeah.
You can pump it.
Let's see here.
Okay.
Arms to the side of the arm.
Right.
And then put one of
All right.
these.
Okay, like something.
When you hear like the first like boom, 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 that's like the first number, and then when it like kind of goes away, it stops. It's just
All right, no, this one. There you go.
I'm not gonna be offended when the next person does so much better.
Okay.
That's kind of fast, but like once the sound like goes away, that's the second sound.
What are we using normal?
Okay.
What are you using normal?
There's like 110.
Okay, I'm about
And then
Okay,
I heard it
all
like
right.
here.
Let's see kind
For
of
75.
somewhere.
That's pretty good.
Kylie, can you try it out over here?
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
So like since you had those in your ears already, we'll use that.
Right, right.
Okay. So when you first hear the sound, it's like boom, 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 and that's like the first sound. And then the second sound is like when it fades away. It's like
I think
the lower. I did not hear it. So yeah, release all the air.
Your arms or something.
So it sounds like it's like
listening for like the sound,
I'm actually
and
like
then it's basically just one bar.
So, yes, you pump it and then you hear the sound.
So the start of the
Or you
sound.
pump it to 180 and then release it. You hear the first sound, that's the first number.
Yeah, so it'll get like it'll be really clear, and then it'll get really muffled. And like,
You
so
bet.
the clear bit is your first number, and the muffled bit is your second number. So you're like 118,
kind of went away fast, but
118.
the first sound was like boom, 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 do that.
And you placed it right here.
Yeah. It doesn't honestly matter. You
Uh,
should just like you can like find the pulse if you want to, but then
Right.
time. So you just have to place it.
Okay. So she's alive?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good. All right, congratulations. Let's try again. How's your arm?
This is our last time it was just chill.
You can hear like a faint like
Those were on like 100.
I did not calculate your
Right.
Heard the sound.
Is it?
Okay.
She's like, I don't know my own pulse.
Yeah, she said do it slow, but not too slow.
Oh, really?
So I feel like there must be a reason.
Yeah,
You should
yeah,
do
yeah.
it.
Like how you're driving.
I know.
Oh, this is cute.
Should we try it again? How are you doing?
Sorry.
You need to redraw.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear that?
180.
Okay, now we have to take it off the rate. It's per minute. Are we supposed to?
No, I didn't hear it. But you heard it when she did.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
Oh,
all right.
I
Well,
calculated
Good thing I'm not,
and
all right. Well, yeah. Anything else want to try? Yeah, all right, cool. So, yeah, and we have these little alcohol pads. So you can just use sweat along.
like when someone takes you out reading your
All
number,
right, thank you.
so like you want to read your reference, no matter how.
Yeah, I can do it. Or,
Do we want to do it?
Yeah.
Like this was.
Yeah, so you're not.
oh, you want to try it? Actually, try doing it.
And then
You
you're
guys
just
try it.
gonna add
Yeah,
listen
listen.
until
I'm
it's
gonna
one
see if I
stage
can.
range, and then you should really start listening.
You only listened a little bit.
Okay, we're here on 122. It's really faint.
I was trying to
That's why I do it, I think, because there's no plus.
Well, it was super nice.
So did we actually write down things? No.
All right, so once you get your numbers on that, or it was trying to get the that blood pressure. Once you get a chance to do that, that's great. You can write the numbers down for blood pressure on page 132, and then we'll move into part 2, and talking about the effects of posture influence on pulse and blood pressure, and and then also we'll talk about part 5 as well. So parts 2 and part 5.
I don't know, man. It's a long time line. Okay, Jane.
I just like started yelling at
So
her.
apparently what I do is no. Yeah. But like it was like down. Yeah.
It's leaking. Unless it's, oh no, it's straight. Oh wait, never mind.
Never mind, I'm just dramatic. Oh, okay. Still, yes.
So the rest of the lab we're gonna use.
Yes, yeah, the automated ones. All right, so for this next part, we're going to be talking about is part 2, and then there's another one called part 5. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you guys go through the data collection phase, and then we'll talk about the meaning behind it afterwards. So on page 133, you have a list of like where it has initials, systolic, diastolic, heart rate, pulse pressure, and mean arterial pressure. So there's a couple of things that you guys are going to be doing when you do supine versus standing. So you're going to be wanting to calculate your pulse pressure and mean arterial pressure. And the equations that you're going to use, they are tucked in here, but I'm also going to just write them up for you up here on the board as well. So mean arterial pressure is equal to, do you guys know this already? Have you seen it in class yet? Okay, what's an equation? There's actually 2 equations. What's one of them? What was it? Something cardiac output and what? TPR. Okay. All right. So, and that's true. I think he said something that's divided by something else. Or is that right?
Isn't it CPR divided by cardiac output?
No, close. Cardiac output's 1, and then it's not divided by anything. Multiplied by TPR. There we go. All right. So you're close. All right.
And you kind of speed
So, so that's one equation that you have. What is cardiac output equal to? Yeah, heart rate times stroke volume times TPR. So to write it all out, that's what you've got here. So sometimes you might see questions that will pose it with just cardiac output. Other times you'll be given those 2 values and you'll have to calculate what your cardiac output is. Okay, so there's another equation for mean arterial pressure. What's that? What's that? 1/3 pulse pressure. Okay. What was it? Plus diastolic. Okay. And then somebody else, what is pulse pressure equal to?
Systolic pressure minus diastolic.
All right. Systolic minus diastolic plus diastolic pressure. So that's what this mean arterial pressure is about here. So there's two different equations that you can get faced with when you're running through this. So it's pretty straightforward in the report, but sometimes on the final, it can get kind of hairy because they'll be asking you questions about changes that can happen in here and what the effects are. So it's really important for you to have practice going through the equations and really kind of getting familiar with them and how they work. And how you can calculate mean arterial pressure from two different ways, and some of the inferences that we can make on the basis of that. So today's exercise is something that we're going to use to help get data that we need for our report, but also I want you to kind of mentally really pay attention as you're kind of going through it and set it up so that when you go back and review it later for the final, you'll be in a good position to remember how you did this work. And we'll talk about some of this stuff up here in our stuff that I have on the projected, but this is what I think might help. Okay, so great. So we have mean arterial pressure. A couple ways to calculate that, and then so you're going to be asked to help fill in some of these different things that you have on page 133. Systolic and diastolic pressure are what you're going to measure. Also heart rate. Those are outputs that you'll get from your automated device that you have. And so you can wrap that around and then hit the button. And let me know if there's trouble. Sometimes the batteries start to run low and they end up acting a little wonky. So try to get a consistent measurement out of it. So most of you guys are going to be doing part 2. Part 2 is when you're going to be measuring, and they're going to ask you to measure when you have your blood pressure as you're standing, and then your blood pressure as you lie down. So you use these little pads here, lie down, and then according to the instructions, go ahead and take the measurement. So they'll give you some specifics about how long you wait and so on, but it's kind of relaxing. So you'll have that. And there will be differences that will happen in terms of your diastolic and systolic pressure and your heart rate. It'll be measurable and consistent, and it's really interesting to see how this affects it. And it's about how gravity affects our blood flow. So we'll go through some of that stuff and why later as we get into it. So that's one thing in part 2. Part 5, so it's going to be 3 out of your 4 group or whatever it is. Or whatever, or 4 out of your 5 if you have 5 people. But one person out of your group is going to be the exerciser. So in this case, what you're going to find is in part 5, is what they call recovery from exercise here. So what we're looking at in part 5 is that you're trying to fill out what they have for table 9.3. So you'll have systolic and diastolic pressures on page 136, pulse pressure. Then you'll be estimating what your stroke volume is, and they have an equation for that down below. And so you can actually go through and kind of calculate what it is from that the equation you have on P to come up with a stroke volume, heart rate, and that's when you can directly measure, and then cardiac output. So you'll be still hooked up there. In all cases, you're looking at systolic, diastolic, and heart rate are the things that you're going to measure in both of these cases. One place, you're lying down and standing up. It's pretty easy. But there's a number here that will be actually gathering that data. The other one is you're going to be working with the exercises. So that exerciser will basically be getting some what's before exercise, and then they'll go through. They'll do the 5 minutes of on the bike, and try to get measurements at 3, 6, 9, and 15 minutes after the exercise is completed. So that's the thing. So you'll need to share the device. So when the person comes off the bike and they're like, "Oh my God, I need it. I'm at my time point or something," be generous and share it so that they can actually get their data to do that. Okay, so that's the two exercises that we're going to be going through today and how we're going to split it up. We'll talk about the step test and exercises 3 and 4, but those 2 and 5 are the key ones that I want you guys to complete and do it in this way. So I think I've explained it okay. Go ahead and break up in your groups, pick out who's going to be the one's going to do the workout, and then who's, everybody else is going to be lying down on the job.
Are you working out here? Okay. The rest of you can get started now.
I mean, it's.
Do you want to start?
Are we all?
So like we can start with like multiple people.